Welcome at the next episode of a Two Tokens podcast, where we dive into various topics related to tokenization, from practical hurdles to regulatory topics and everything else that goes around in our world. And today we're going to talk about the EU Blockchain Sandboxes that have been going on for the past 3 years and are still going on, where through many different use cases we touch upon many regulatory topics as a whole. And I'm not going to do that by myself, obviously. By the way, my name is Olivier Rikken, Head of Research of the Two Tokens Foundation. And I'm here being joined today by Johannes Wirtz. Johannes, welcome. Partner at Bird Bird Frankfurt, specialized in financial regulation, right?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Well, great to have you here. So let's deep dive a little bit further after I introduce my next guest. That is Mauro Halve. Mauro, Head of Compliance of Amdax. Welcome as well.
Thank you.
And great to see you both here in the same room, especially as we have worked together quite a lot over the past few months, I must say, in one of these EU regulatory sandboxes.
Mostly online, so.
True,
yeah.
true. So it's always good to see each other in person. Hey, let's dive into the EU blockchain sandboxes that we have been working on. And to start out with you, Johannes, there are sandboxes and sandboxes. Let me put it like that. And what are the differences between those sandboxes and what makes this EU blockchain sandbox that we have participating in so unique?
Yeah, you may have heard about national sandboxes where a certain regulator allows startup to play more or less in a sandbox, testing their products, getting released from strict regulation, but having certain limits, what they can do and what not. This is what the EU Blockchain Sandbox is not about. The EU Blockchain Sandbox is different. It's a series of dialogues where use case owners get the chance to get in contact with different regulators all over Europe, not limited to the financial sector, but also beyond. And there in those dialogues, there is strict confidentiality on both sides. So on the one hand, the use case owner can freely describe what they are doing or what they want to do. And on the other hand, the regulators are bound by this confidentiality and cannot pass this on, those informations. So there is actually room for free speech. And there is a benefit on both sides that they can discuss their use cases. On the one hand, the regulators can learn what is in the market, what are the innovative use cases. And on the other hand, the use case owners can see what is a regulation, what are the reactions of the regulators. And in those dialogues, there's a lot of room for interaction and exchange. And this makes this use case, this European blockchain sandbox so unique compared to other sandboxes, and brings a benefit from my perspective to both sides on the table.
Yeah, very good and very clear. Thank you. With regards to these various cohorts, you already mentioned the use case. I already mentioned the third cohort, meaning we had 3 batches of use cases. How many use cases were accepted per cohort so far?
Yeah, as you said, we had 3 cohorts. In each cohort were 20 use cases. And those ranging from different areas. Of course, there is a certain view on the financial services use cases, in particular for me as a financial regulatory lawyer, a certain interest in those, but it was not limited. So we had also customs authorities involved and data protection authorities, really giving the focus on the blockchain topic, not on financial regulation.
Thanks. And Mauro, over to you. You were one of the participants in one of the use cases. Correct. In this second cohort.
Yes.
But before we maybe elaborate a bit more on the use case itself, just in general, you as a industry participant in this case, what do you see as an added value to participate in a sandbox, especially a sandbox like this?
Yeah, so Johannes touched upon what in general are the benefits of a sandbox like this, and I think operating in such a legal vacuum can really allow the participants to move more freely than they ever could, and not just and in combination or working together with a regulator instead of always being on opposite sides of the table. So I think that is one of the main benefits. And for us, I think it depends on the topic of a cohort, but with the EU regulatory framework for crypto assets and for crypto asset service providers, it was fractured. We had all different types of registration types and mostly AML topic in the EU. And what we've seen with MiCA, EU harmonized, or at least intended harmonized level playing field. And using such a sandbox can also reconciliate all these national regulators or supervisors and all types of authorities to get on that same page. Because obviously from the EU, from the top up, this was the new framework, but then you have all these national regulators that need to regulate the entities there.
Yeah, so basically we have MiCA regulation being implemented,
Yes.
and although it's the same set of rules on paper, it's always a national interpretation of the regulators at that point. So
Absolutely.
what you're saying is by getting all the regulators in a room, we start to talk the same language and understand the same
Yeah, so typically
problems.
you try to see where the gray areas are in such a sandbox, and together with these regulators, going from theory to practice. To see what are the practical limitations on what has been written on paper.
Yeah. Hey, and Johannes, Bird Bird was the legal party guiding the process through the whole of the 3 cohorts. But you, from a personal standpoint, from a personal experience, I know it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to put into these sandboxes and into these use cases. So you, from a personal standpoint, why were you so eager to participate in this sandbox?
Yeah, I already mentioned that the use case owner can learn from the regulators can learn from the use case owner.
Yes.
And me as a lawyer now involved in blockchain projects for more than 10 years, I can always learn from both sides. So on the one hand, I see innovative use cases. On the other hand, I see how regulators respond to it. And on both sides, sure, can always be surprised by some innovative ideas from use case owners. But I could also be surprised by some reactions of regulators. To give one example, in one of the use cases, we discussed on NFTs. And from the outset, it was clear to the use case that those NFTs were, from a legal perspective, financial instruments, all set up as a class of securities. So there was no doubt that they could be a benefit from an exemption under MiCA. On the other hand, the regulator, as soon as we mentioned NFTs, they jumped on the word that you can't call it NFTs. And we said, okay, it's from a technical perspective. It is. They said, doesn't matter. As soon as I hear it's NFTs, I need to say it's wrong. And there was a bit also in learning on my side to see how our regulator would react on certain words, and taking those from a totally different perspective, while it was clear that those tokens were not unique and non-fungible. So this brought me to the point that I said I want to be involved in several use case discussions in each cohort. As you mentioned, it takes a lot of time to dig into each of those use cases and prepare the dialogue meetings, discuss with the use case owner, have the meetings with the regulators and so on. So there's of course a natural limit, but I'm very glad that I could participate in quite a few during the last 3 years.
Yeah, and it's a very valid point that you're raising, actually, that we do have such a mix-up of vocabulary all the time, and it starts with the vocabulary. To be frankly, that do we approach a NFT from a technical point of view or a legal/functional point of view, that can make a huge difference for regulation and all other things as well. So yeah, thanks for that, Mauro. Obviously, you participated in one of the use cases. In this case, in the second cohort with a range of other parties. And beforehand, in general, you mentioned, hey, it's very interesting to get all the different regulators from Europe all together into one room. But if I'm correct, Amdax is under the Dutch regulators, right?
Correct.
So what was the specific interest then for Amdax to join?
Well, despite not having any real relevance to the use case we picked, Amdax is it was a natural step for us because we just wanted to get more insights in regulatory alignment. So working together with other market participants, so to say, learning from them, how do they interpret key provisions, how do regulators interpret key provisions, how do regulators differ in these provisions. So it was really helpful for us, even though, well, not many of the articles or provisions were really relevant for our MiCA application. It did provide such valuable insights in how do they look at certain things, because then you can, well, extrapolate that to, well, how would they maybe react to this and that. And on top of that, it turned out that creating a use case where it was actually trying to find out how can we not become a custodian. Well, we are a custodian. So, and I know all the requirements for a custodian. Mm-hmm. But looking from a perspective of trying to get the maximum room without qualifying is like a puzzle that requires such different thinking. So it was really valuable for me as a head of compliance of a custodian to get that. So in hindsight, it was very useful.
Yeah. Great to hear.
Yeah.
Great to hear. And I do have to say, and we cannot disclose all the dialogues, obviously, due to the confidentiality. But there was great room for dialogue to have different visions on certain topics, and it really
the amount of regulators was also increasing every cohort, right?
Yeah.
It was much more interesting. They were much more interested.
Yeah.
Later on, yeah.
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was also not clear to the regulators what is it about.
Yeah.
Also, what I mentioned in the beginning, the difference between different types of sandboxes was perhaps on the first sight not clear, but got clearer due to the efforts by my colleagues to approach them. In particular, our leader on this project, Marian, who did a great job approaching so many different regulators and explaining again and again what it's about. And I think those regulators who then participated in the first cohort, they saw the benefit and naturally went on and asked, when can we start with the second cohort? So this is really showing that they saw the benefit and that this whole project has far more reach than I think was predicted in the first place.
And I think one of the strong points, and now we're jumping also a little bit ahead of the rest, but one of the strong points is that all the use cases that were accepted into the cohorts were not theoretically use cases, but really things that we are being put into practice. You had to have a certain TLR level, right? Or TRL level.
Yeah, I think it's worth taking a look at the requirements and on the acceptance process. So the acceptance process was done completely without our involvement, but was led by some professors who had a more technical side, but also insight on the companies, and they were necessary to apply for it. As you said, the net to be more or less a running project. Not just the idea, but it needs to be already running and had a certain stage of development. And I think this made it also quite good from the preconditions, because most of them had already tested what is the regulatory environment, and so we had already a starting point. But nevertheless, some were surprised by some comments from regulators, in particular if those were not the regulators which are actually competent for them. For example, use case from, let's pick Portugal, might be surprised by the view of the Danish regulator, just as an example.
Yeah.
They all have different backgrounds, different history, and probably also different implementation on European directives. And bringing those to the table and starting discussions is fruitful for whole Europe.
Yeah. Hey, and obviously you participated in more dialogue sessions than we did. We were only bound to the use cases we were involved in. You obviously were a participant in more than one use case. Did you experience any differences worth noting between the different use cases, or?
Well, I think it's quite natural that they have a different level also on preparation. So there were some use cases by startups. There were some with a different background. So there you could see also the different in preparation. Some started with their more or less investor presentation, their pitch deck, and we needed to guide them to get a presentation a regulator actually could understand. There are a lot of questions where an investor might look at, but the regulator doesn't care, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And then we regulator touched on the question as soon as the token was involved: how is this token to be qualified? Is it a financial instrument? Is it a crypto asset regulated by MiCA, or is it something else? And I think this was more or less a theme which was repeated in many discussions, and therefore also provided a lot of insights also for the best practices report. It was just mentioned dialogues were all confidential. That's true and very important. But the outcome and the lessons learned are not limited to the regulators and the use case owners who participated, but there is for each cohort a best practice report publicly available, spreading some of the insights and some of the common ground reached by use case owners and regulators.
Yeah, and by experience, I also know where we didn't find any common ground, that sometimes even comes into the best practice report as well as a point of attention where we still have to do follow-up research, right?
Absolutely,
It's a complete new field, so we have to find out how it works in some cases. Hey, Mauro, on your behalf, you as a participant, what was your most positive experience of the whole, and were there any improvement points as well?
Well, the highlight was definitely the engagement with the regulators. I've been working with regulators in the Netherlands, AFM, DNB, for quite some years now, and not to say that they lack competence, but I was genuinely surprised by the amount of expertise that was with all the other regulators in the member states. I think we were able to present a very good position, discuss risk, and we really went forward with the use case, right? We really had some valuable insights that could help the other participants that were actually the companies building these things. What could be improved? Well, perhaps time. I think these things could really take time more time would really result in more solutions, more practical insights, and more use cases, obviously. So I would definitely say let's get more of these cohorts in, and maybe get some more time per cohort as well. In general, I give it a very good grade.
Yeah, and an immediate follow-up question, and I think I know the answer. If you were invited for another cohort, would you join or not?
Oh, without hesitation. Yeah, and also because I really think it allows this industry, the crypto industry, to demonstrate the willingness, the compliance mindset, the quality of this industry towards these regulators, which I think is very important because we've had such a long time having an image issue, to say the least. Mm-hmm. So, and I definitely see shifts in there, and I think this could only contribute to announcement of that.
Yeah. We are in cohort 3 now. It is the last one, right, of the cohort so far.
As soon as I'm informed, yes, it's the last. I have no insights what happened afterwards.
Yeah, me neither. So, but. No, but it would be of value, I would say, if there is a 4th cohort or a 5th cohort, at least based on the NS3 in the room, I would say.
Yeah, I think the ongoing dialogue between use cases and regulators is very important. I don't know whether it's possible to take a similar setup, but there needs to be ways to foster those dialogues on any level. And I hope that this is also something which the national competent authorities might take from this process, that they might start something similar, and see how they can get engaged, how they can, on the one hand, get the knowledge from the market, and on the other hand, how they can transpose what they're actually thinking about regulation and how they will apply it.
Yeah, perfect. And on that message, I would say, if you are interested in know more about the results of the various regulatory sandbox, Johannes already mentioned it. There are at the moment in time 2 best practice reports, one from cohort 1 and one from cohort 2. Cohort 3 is just underway, so the best practice report is bound to be there end of year. That is the planning, right?
That's the plan.
So somewhere around the end of 2025, beginning of 2026, let me put it like that. And it is absolutely worth reading because these are lessons for the whole industry. So if you do anything with tokenization, there are a lot of valuable lessons in there. So please take your time and read those reports. They read quite easily, I do have to say. They might give you answers, they might give you more questions, but they will take you a step further. So thank you so much for attending, Johannes and Mauro.
Thank you.
Great to have you in the room. And for you, next time we come up with another nice podcast, and you can always listen back to one of the many we made before. So thank you for listening in, and hopefully you will join in our podcast next time as well. Thank you very much.
That was it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening in, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find our contact details at www.twotokens.org.